Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another live interview at Carte de Viner. It is very, very quickly after our previous interview, but it is a very different subject, so we hope you'll stay with us. And it's also a great time to have this conversation. Tonight we're talking about cooking instead. So, Easter Western Easter has just gone. Eid is coming next week, Romanian Orthodox Easter in a few weeks' time. So it's a great time to talk about cooking and baking. I am Andra, and I'm here with my colleague Sorina from the Romanian diaspora, and Dr. Likila Bed, who has been helping out on our Carta de Vina project for a few months now. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, Carta de Viner is a book recommendation project, which is now in its fourth year. It's a book a week, and once a month, we try to have either a recorded or a live interview with an author. And we love to talk about either Romanian books or books by Romanian authors. Or anything to do with Romania, really. We've spoken about fiction books which are set in Romania, about history, take your pick. So without further ado, Nicola, would you like to introduce our guest for tonight, please?
Yes, thank you, Andrea. Yeah, it's my absolute pleasure to be able to welcome Irina to this evening's event. Irina is a Romanian-born James Beard award-winning food writer and culinary instructor now living in Wales. Her first book, Carpathia, Food from the Heart of Romania, published in 2020, was shortlisted by the UK Guild of Food Writers for the Best International Cookbook Award and features over 100 recipes, including everything from char-grilled aubergines, polenta fritters, and butterbean hummus to tangy borscht. Apologies if I'm pronouncing that wrongly, stuffed breads and Viennese-style layer cakes, while her second book, Tava, Eastern European Baking and Desserts from Romania and Beyond, published in 2022, celebrates centuries of diversity by sharing the stories behind those dishes that have come to represent different cultural communities across the country. Her writings and recipes constitute a love letter to Romania, raising the profile of Romanian culinary histories and heritages, and bringing to the fore knowledge and traditions little known outside of Romania. So thank you again, Irina, for joining us. And I think Serena is kicking off our discussion this evening.
If she finds the mute button, as always. So done that. I suppose we could start by something that we potentially share and have in common. I think we're of similar age, so I'm wondering if you could possibly take us back to childhood in the communist era, and any early memories of cooking with food and sparsity of food, and therefore being really inventive with stuff, and the impact of your mother's home cooking. For me, it's my nan's cooking and my mother's. So that impact on your life and your career as well.
On my career. Well, you know that it is traditional in Romania, especially for girls, to learn from their mothers and grandmothers to cook just by helping in the kitchen. I don't think I followed the recipe or cookbook when I was with mom in the kitchen. So yes, well, thank you for inviting me tonight. It's a pleasure to be here and to talk about cooking and my books as well. And I started with, my first book was Carpathia, as Nicola said. And I just wanted to put in one book, not only the recipes I grew up with, but also the recipes and the actual dishes that if you travel to Romania, you will find them in restaurants or in places where you want to eat. So to create a bit of familiarity with kind of what type of cuisine to expect or what type of dishes to order. And from my childhood, I mean, it was part of it in during the communist regime, and I remember it was hard, and I think it was hard for my parents, but they kind of managed to shelter us, from all the hardship. But I do remember coming back from school, usually, and if I saw someone queuing or people queuing to get something, I was just right there in the queue. I wasn't going to go home, just in case it was something meat or butter or something, and then mom would come to kind of have a look around, because she would probably, she would know that I was like queuing somewhere, and then send my sister, and it was all like queuing in shifts kind of thing, overnight sometimes. But it wasn't always that bad, there were years when everything was rationed, and you just had a liter of oil for a week for a family of 4 or something like that, and no meat. And the chickens were so tiny, they were sold in pairs. They were coming like 2 instead of 1, because they looked like pigeons. So it was hard. We had a nickname, Frații Petreuși, for the chickens. Frații Petreuși were 2 singers. They were twins. They were quite
I was
little.
going to say, I was wondering if
Petreuși singers, folk music, and they poor people. They were twins, and they were singing, and they were really skinny. So because of that, we were saying Frații Petreuși to the 2 chickens that were sold in the shops, if you were lucky enough to get those as well, because you need to remember there was a black market as well. So we were queuing outside while the other people were getting the chickens from the back of the store, so that was another thing. So in a way, yeah, we didn't find it that it was, as children, we didn't find it. I think it was an adventure all the time to queue for everything. But we also had relatives in the countryside, like almost everyone. And my mother was from Transylvania. My grandmother was from Transylvania, from my mother's side. And we had relatives there. And for instance, every December, we would go there to slaughter the pig and get all the meat back home to Bucharest in the boot of the car, and then cure the sausages of the washing lines in the balcony, because you didn't have where to dry them. So and all sorts of things. So that pig for us in December basically saved our lives during the winter, January, February, March, even later, till Easter. And then my father was from the south, close to Bucharest. So we had our grandmother over there, she had the hens, and so we had got eggs. It was closer than going all the way to Transylvania from Bucharest, which is, I don't know, 6 hours drive or something. So we kind of managed to have few bits and bobs, even if they were not in the shops all the time. And it's hard. Life in the city, when you don't have access to food and only to shops, is very hard. You can't. What can you grow on the balcony to actually feed a family of 4? Beans, whatever. They are not all the time. So there is a season for everything. But looking back now, without trying to romanticize all that communist regime thing, we ate seasonally. I remember celebrating the moment where aubergines were in season. That end of August was like, yeah, let's make salata de vinete. This aubergine dip that was just so good because it was seasonal, and we were kind of eager to have that. We were anticipating it. Today you find aubergines everywhere all the time, in January, in September, any time, it doesn't matter. The same, with strawberries. So we kind of ate with the seasons, which doesn't happen now. But perhaps that was the only good thing, to find something at the market, some sort of tomatoes and some sort of, all the other stuff so that was in a way my childhood in the capital of Romania, in Bucharest. We had an apartment in a block of apartments. There were like 10 floors, 4 apartments per floor. So quite a lot of people in one of those, like sardines. And there were loads of apartments, because this is Bucharest. Bucharest, apart from the old town and the part of that was old villa quarters and stuff. It's all full of blocks of apartments. So this is how we live and still live and lived. So quite a lot of people in every area of Bucharest. So it wasn't a childhood with a garden necessarily during the communist regime, although we had people in the countryside, but it wasn't like I was going to go out every day to pick some tomatoes and make a salad with olive oil. So no, olive oil didn't exist.
There was no such.
No, I mean, this is a trend now that we put olive oil on the salad and stuff, but we used to have sunflower oil and that's it, and cook with lard from the pig, because this is what we have. We have, you know, pork, pigs, and we eat chicken and we eat lamb for Easter usually. I'd still consider it a seasonal meat, which is nice and a good thing to have, eat lamb in spring, but then move on to eat hocket and mutton. Don't just eat lamb all the time, because how many lambs can you have throughout the year, you know? So
Yeah.
so I still like the fact that is seasonal lamb, and it was seasonal when I grew up as well. There were markets with lambs, and you can just before Easter, and you could go and pick the one you wanted, and you know, so it was kind of very fresh approach to meat, to be honest.
Yeah.
But
You
because
just-
of that, sorry.
You just reminded me of a conversation I had with somebody recently. They're English and they just dropped me a message to say, hey, it's seasonal bunny rabbits time and venison time. It's really good now, so keep your eyes out on that. And that reminded me of an episode in my childhood where grandma came home with a rabbit. It wasn't something that you could buy in the shop. It wasn't something that, unless you had the right connection of somebody who was able to hunt it or source it otherwise, it wasn't something that you would eat. But it was only very early springtime, and that's it. That was the only window.
Yes. Yeah, so it is. I think this is a good approach to eating meat, to eat seasonal, you know, what is in season, and also to diversify. I know that, for instance, here in the UK, people don't eat veal, which is a shame, because there is a dairy industry that is far more developed than the one in Romania. But we eat veal, and we used to eat, and we eat veal in Romania. And veal is popular in Central Europe in cuisine. In Germany, you know, Austria, schnitzel initially was a veal schnitzel, not a pork, not a chicken, not nothing. Veal was the main meat in there. So we still do some things like that. You know, we eat lamb, and then we eat all the lamb and then mutton. That's why we have the mutton pastrami, which is so traditional on the menu. It is not always cooked in the right way, so it is a bit stringy in some restaurants, but we have the tradition of curing meat and actually recooking it. Even if it's cured already, you put it on the grill to serve it warm, which is not what other people do with the pastrami, whether it's beef or goose or mutton. They just slice it as ham, for instance, and they put it in a sandwich. But in Romania, it's cooked, it's put on the grill. So you serve it with polenta, you serve it with muștei, with garlic sauce. So we have that very traditional recipe of eating mutton pastrami, even if the technique itself is not necessarily only Romanian. You'll find it, you know, in all the countries and the cultures that needed to preserve meat, and drying and curing meat. It's one of them. So when we didn't have freezers and fridges and stuff.
I just wondered if we could go back to your mom, because I know you dedicated Carpathia to your mom, and if you could elaborate a little more on as you said at the beginning, the role of women in terms of Romania's culinary traditions, you know, sort of the passing down of these recipes from generation to generation, and whether this was kind of an oral tradition or whether people also wrote things down. And yeah, I'm just fascinated by that. So
yes, it is an oral tradition, and it was on the job, basically. It was like let's make this, and you slice that and clean that onion and, you know, put it on the table, and you kind of learn. You don't understand. I mean, I never realized that I learned so much about cooking. It's only when I moved to the UK, I realized that I knew how to cook. But in Romania, I spent a lot of time with mom in the kitchen, because I think that it was also a way for her to keep an eye on me. Not that I really had where to go in a 40 square meter apartment, you know, I couldn't really escape anywhere else, but it's just, you know, spending time with her in the kitchen. She went to a job. She worked every day, including on a Saturday. Because before the communist regime fell, we worked on a Saturday as well. So she used to go to work 8 hours a day, which are never 8 hours, because obviously you spend an hour going and spend an hour coming. So and also she looked after a family of 4, you know, dad, my sister and I. And quite a lot of the time she used to say, what do you like to eat? And what's your favorite? And what should I cook? So she ended up cooking 3 dishes. If I really wanted only the cauliflower stew that I was obsessed with when I was little. And then my dad wanted something else, and my sister was a bit like, oh, I don't really want to, you know, like teenagers. Anyway, but I used to help her, meet her at the market, to help her to do all the shopping, you know. Then when it was spring and we had the first spring onions and spring garlic, because we eat garlic young the way we eat spring onions. So they look identical. It's just the leaf is different. It's flatter. It's a flat leaf on the garlic, and a round.
And it's split.
Yeah. So when you get those at the market, you buy them, and then you come home and you just don't eat it. You clean them first, you know, you top and tail them. So it's a lot of work to do. And if you have another 3 dishes to make and also clean the house or whatever she was doing, you ask the girl, me, you know, clean this or do this, you know. I remember I was in charge of making mayo, because, you know, you didn't buy the mayo, you made the mayo if you had the good eggs and stuff. And mayo, it's a lot of whisking, you know. So obviously you ask someone who has a lot of time on her hands, like me. So as a child with her in the kitchen, tara masalata, we love that icre, salate de icre. Tara masalata, again, it's a thing that takes time because you whisk it. So I was in charge of that. So I started to judge the right consistency of something that apparently was very difficult, you know, like the right consistency of mayo, when to add more oil, when to stop, what if it splits, and all that story, you know. The same with tara masalata. We didn't put any soaked bread in tara masalata unless it split when you fixed it. That was exactly. So when it split, the way you fixed it was to put soaked bread in it. But you don't start with soaked bread. I can see now all sorts of recipes. People put soaked bread from the very beginning, which is not the right.
No, definitely not.
I'll go back to Nicola's question now, because I'm tempted to, like other people, to say that was not the right recipe. So when we learn from our parents, so especially from our moms and from grandmothers, people will love so much. When someone else comes and says, this is not the right recipe, this is how I make it, because they learn from their moms and from their grandparents, then there is this conflict for us to say, this is not right. Your recipe is not right, because it's not like the way I make it at home. And we tend to consider traditional recipes to be the ones that like my mom or my grandmother used to make. So that for us in our world, that's traditional. If we then research it, and if you want to write about it like I do, or are passionate about cooking, then you look further and you kind of look in books, look into kind of history books as well. And you start to realize that your recipe is not the only recipe, and there is not the right recipe and the wrong recipe. It's just the recipe that belongs to your family and the recipe that belongs to my family, and so on. So we are a bit in this respect, if you like Italians. You know, if it's not like mama made it, then it's not the right recipe. So it's the same for us. And this comes only from the fact that we learn on the job, and we learn from the family. We don't learn from a book, kind of, you know, what does Irina say? Okay, well, I'll do it like this. And what about other authors, and so on. So the recipes are personal. They matter to us and to our identity and how we want to celebrate. So, and this what happens when you learn from your family over the years and participate. So cooking is, I wouldn't necessarily say communal thing, because in my case, I was only with my mum and sometimes my sister when she wanted to help. But, you know, otherwise it was not in that block of apartments where we lived. It was not like all the neighbors were gathering in the kitchen to cook together. I think in a city, the dynamic was different in this kind of thing. In the countryside, yes, you were gathering to cook, also to share the resources. So like in Transylvania, my auntie, she would bake bread. So let's say every 2 weeks. So it was 2 weeks bread made with potato without potato, her choice. But she would make the bread one time at her place, and people would gather there, the women, to bake their own bread in there. And then after 2 weeks, then they would meet somewhere else at someone else's house and so on. So it was more like a gathering to cook for daily food. I'm not talking about funerals or weddings or
that's different.
That's different. That's religious traditional cooking, which has to be made together, because it's part of the ritual. But yeah, so again, for my childhood, it wasn't a lot of we didn't have a lot of people in the apartment all the time, coming and going and cooking and eating and so on. And I think it's also part of again, at the beginning of my childhood, of the communist regime, where you were not encouraged to actually gather with other people, because it was against the rules in a way. If you were with other people, you can have a conspiracy theory and do whatever. So it wasn't encouraged.
So maybe that's the story where I would say we were a little bit different from the rest of the neighbors, because what you're describing there was exactly my nan's apartment. There was a coming and going for as far as I can remember. And the one thing that they used to do together was measuring each other's kozanak.
Yes.
There were 5 sisters all together, and we used to go from one to another to see who baked the better. And they would just sit and judge each other, like eat and talk and chat and actually be really harsh with each other.
Yes.
But that was part of their thing of how did you make yours, and how come yours are growing bigger than mine, etc., etc. But what I was going to say is what you described made me think of the fact that many people ask me when I cooked in the UK, how come you don't measure? And it's always by the feel, because like you said, I never learned from a book. I learned by watching my nan. I learned by watching my mother. And as a consequence, I know how much I can grab with my hand. I can kind of judge how much I can pour, but I never measure. And I never taste my food when I cook. So it's very weird for my husband, who's just looking at me and saying, how do you know that's ready? I don't know.
Well, exactly. It comes with, and it's the same with tasting. I mean, I do taste now, but it's not necessarily a thing that we learn, because you can also smell. I smell if something is not salty enough, for instance. You'll probably laugh, but I know, so I put more. Or if it's too salty, I can smell it, so I can smell that, and all the rest of the spices or whatever you put, paprika, you can smell if the flavors are okay or not. So you can adjust by smell. You don't have to taste, but I taste. And also because, now I write books, so I need to measure. But we do know what it means, a soft dough, not too sticky, I mean, how can I explain this in a book? It kind of, and the way you try to test the stickiness with this side of the hand, not with the side of with the hand that you were kneading, you just with this, that you didn't use it for kneading. So all sorts of things that you learn like that. And these things, matter now, later on, when, especially for me, I moved to the UK and I was like really, in a way, fascinated by the British food. I like the diversity and the history, and also the pride every region takes in what their own bakes, for instance, like Eccles cakes and Bakewell tart and all that. A beautiful heritage in baking as well with the British. And also I love the fact that they are obsessed here, Brits, with apples, but we are too. I mean, placinta cu mere, apple pie, is like you eat it all the time. So I found many similarities, and then bit by bit I started to what actually happened with me is like my first Easter in the UK. I have to say I was a bit disappointed that there is no traditional bake or food apart from the roast lamb you do, but then you do it all the time in the UK. There was no traditional cooking, and I missed that Romanian traditional cooking. I miss drob. I miss the meatloaf we make with minced meat. I missed the ciorba de miel soup, lamb soup, and I missed pască, and I missed also cozonac. So this is how I started. I said, well, next year I'll eat yours, then I'll make mine as well, because I realized that what mattered was not necessarily the dish at the end to eat, but the fact that I was making it, and the fact that I was fasting and observing Lent, so I can enjoy more the Easter lunch and everything else that happened in terms of food at Easter. So I was kind of embracing the British cuisine, but also Easter started me. Easter for me was the point when I said I have to cook Romanian from time to time. And then I ended up cooking all the time. But it started like that. And then Christmas, I started to bake for Christmas. And then bit by bit, I started to make some Romanian dishes and looked at how people were reacting to those dishes, saying whether this was new or because the names were similar to other dishes they had when they traveled to other countries. They said, well, for instance, moussaka, why do you eat moussaka? So it was a challenge for me as well to explain the historical context as well, not just the dish. So why do you eat moussaka? I was thinking, well, it's traditional dish. We've been eating it for centuries, possibly. So it needs to be traditional to Romania as well, not just to Greece. And it's actually, if you look at the history of moussaka, it's a Persian dish when it started. So it's a dish that is really a Middle Eastern dish. So it's just associated with Greece because they were very good at marketing. What can I say? So this is it. So yeah, this is how I started to cook, and dedicated my first book to my mom, because when I was cooking my dishes, I was actually, like you said, Sorina, I wasn't measuring anything. And I was in this situation when I remembered how to do things without asking. Mom, in the meantime, died, so I really didn't have what to do. Yeah. Dad knows a lot of theory, so you'll ask him and he gives you a lot of, but he never cooked. So I'm sorry. I mean, Dad knows a lot about cooking.
Well, just going back to what you were saying about apples, the Romanians loving apples and things like that. For those who aren't familiar and are watching later, I wonder if you could talk us through some of the staple Romanian ingredients in cooking and baking.
Yes. Okay. Briefly, because we have a lot.
Yeah.
Well, let me start with cornmeal, just to diversify a bit, because we talked about meat and stuff. So cornmeal, maize, it's kind of, you'll see everywhere in Romania, although some communities, especially in the Banat, stay away from maize because of the association with being poor, but from the past. So they eat more bread, but otherwise you see cornmeal in different ways, cooked in different ways throughout the country. As a bread, sometimes mixed with flour. It was just a way to make flour last for longer, basically. So we just mix two staple ingredients. to make bread, but also cornmeal in itself you would boil it as porridge, for instance. That's another thing I discovered when I moved to the UK. I was like, oh, you're making this with oats. We're making with maize. So, and it is a breakfast dish. You can boil and make it sweet and serve it with milk around, exactly like you put milk around porridge. And we can serve it with jam. Plum jam is in Romania very popular for this kind of breakfast dish. Some people just sprinkle cinnamon on top, because cinnamon is as well a staple spice in Romania. And it used to be used in savory dishes historically and baking, but now it's only in baking. So you won't see it in savory dishes anymore. It disappeared. Paprika took over a lot of spices that were used in savory and sweet. So some spices just retreated to be just sweet, and others disappeared. So again, cornmeal, so it's used at breakfast time, starters like you see in Carpathia, stuffed with cheese, we'll call it bulls, balmosh in Maramuresh with all sorts of different types of milk and sour cream and whey, and add it at a certain time so you can make a very good balmosh. It's also used as a side dish, like it is used in the UK when it's used, or in Italy. And we also make alivenci in Moldova, which is, whether sweet or savory, and prăjitură, I mean, cake, polenta cake, again, we serve it with jam. So cornmeal is very versatile, gluten-free as well, and you can make it only with water. If the cornmeal is very good, you don't need to add any other ingredients, no butter, no milk, no anything, just water, and it's absolutely beautiful. But with the one we find in the shop, then we need to add more.
I think Andra is dying to say something now.
Sorry, that actually reminds me of a conversation Sorina and I had when we were doing the Romanian pop-up, because we were looking at what to put on the menu. So she was cooking a number of things, and the sort of stewy stuff that you could keep warm and reheat. We were talking about, what should we have as a side? And I said, well, why don't we have polenta? Because it's quick and easy to make on the spot. And I go, and you can make it vegan for the people who want it vegan.
You can.
At which point she looks at me with this very odd face, like, but it is vegan. I'm like, no, it's got butter in it.
No, it doesn't.
Yes, and other things.
So this has been our ongoing joke since 2018 about vegan mamaliga, which is traditionally in some parts of the country, but not so much in the others.
And I can just about imagine the French right now, Normandy, having it on with the rest of the country in the same way that Banat is having it with the rest of the country, because it's kind of the equivalency of their bread on butter and cream and I don't know what else, but definitely not how the rest of the country eats mamaliga. So.
And I ended up explaining that, and thinking back about it, a lot of the dishes in Banat have either butter or sour cream.
Yeah.
A lot of them do, either cooked into it or added afterwards. So you'd add sour cream to your vegetable ciorba.
You really don't need to every single time. You can just vary it
but it's much.
Yeah. In the South, we don't put a lot of sour cream, although there are exceptions, but you leave it clear and you put vinegar if you like, or you put some egg or whatever. But in Transylvania, so Banat is part of it, is you put a lot of sour cream. In Moldavia, you put a lot of sour cream. I'm sure they put it in Moldova as well. Moldavians are famous for the amount of sour cream they put in everything. So if you have a Moldavian at the table and you put some sour cream, make sure you have some more in the fridge, because he's going to finish it. So that's a thing. But in the South, it's not quite the same. They are kept clear sometimes. In Transylvania, again, we make roux very often, so vrântaș. So we fry the flour with butter, and we put that in stew, and you put that in ciorba. I had in Saski's last year, I had a very, very good butter bean soup that had roux in it and vinegar at the same time, and they had smântână as well, so sour cream. So quite a lot of everything in, but it was delicious. So mom coming from Transylvania and my grandmother, they used to cook with roux, but then at some point I was ill when I was little, like a liver disease, hepatitis, and mom started to cook really kind of not very heavy. So she removed all the roux, all this rântaș from all the traditional dishes. And I have to say that they were less delicious. I think that roux adds some smoothness. And even now, today, if you give me a dish and has that rântaș in it, and if it's cooked properly, I mean, this is what I mean. It needs to be cooked properly, because and that you won't feel bad after that. If it's cooked properly. If the flour is not cooked properly, then you will have issues with it. Then you will also taste it. But even if it's cooked properly, I will still know that something has a rântaș in it, because I grew up with it and I recognize it. And it's also because it's delicious. I think it's delicious the way it is. But again, in the South, people don't use that. Again, another ingredient that is in Transylvania, talking about staple ingredients, we have caraway seeds, quite a lot of caraway seeds, and tarragon. You cross the mountains in the south or in the eastern Moldavia, you know that you are not in Transylvania, because these are just gone, they disappeared. So we have more, you know, even lavage, you will have lavage in the south quite a lot. You have quite a lot of peppers. Oltenian soup, stuffed peppers, raci, which we call crayfish, but there is no crayfish in the soup. It's just a nickname because it's very red because of the red peppers. So that's another thing. So another staple ingredient, I would say, let's talk about dairy, because we are a country of dairy. First of all, everywhere we have, whether cattle or sheep. So we have not only matured cheese, which is telemer usually, which is matured in salt and brine, a bit like feta, but not as smooth. Ours is harder and develops some air pockets in it, so it has a texture. So it's absolutely delicious in pies. It's amazing. But we also use a lot of fresher cheese called curd cheese, brânză de vaci. And when we reboil the whey left over from brânză de vaci or any cheese, we make urdă, which is a sort of ricotta, which is sweet. It's amazing. So urdă cu mărar, so ricotta with dill, is just the best starter in the world. I mean, put that on a slice of pepper and here we go. No bread, you don't need any bread. That's your starter. So these are special ingredients. Sour cream, because we mentioned this, Nicola, already, smântână and crème fraîche. I found that in the UK, it's nice to combine them. Sour cream it's not as fat as crème fraîche, but smântână in Romania, the sour cream in Romania, is very thick. So you can actually slice it with a knife if it's properly made. So sometimes I rather use crème fraîche in recipes rather than sour cream, because sour cream is softer, and so on. So we use curd cheese because it's so versatile and it's not mature, so it's not salty. We use curd cheese in baking, so in sweet dishes. The sister of our plăcintă cu mere, so apple pie, is plăcintă cu brânză. Cheese pie, but the sweet version. So we sweeten it with dried fruit. So you put sultanas or raisins, and you can put honey or you can put sugar. And that is another pie that you will find it even today in bakeries as a street food staple. You will whether have a plăcintă cu mere or you have a plăcintă cu brânză. When there is pumpkin season in the autumn, we have a plăcintă cu dovleac, which is pumpkin pie, but sweet.
But again, that's a Transylvanian thing. You don't really find that in the south as much, or definitely not in Muntenia, maybe Oltenia more.
Well, you will find it in Dobroja because it's actually has a Turkish origin.
Yes.
You know that Transylvania was for around 200 years under the Ottoman Empire.
Yeah.
And not only Transylvania. So this is how the strudel ended up in Austria through the Ottoman Empire, because they didn't have this skill to make a strudel. So the strudel is, you know, from the Ottoman Empire came to Austria. They didn't have it otherwise. So, and this is a leftover in Transylvania as well, but then you will find it in Dobroja. And why? Because we have Turkish communities in Dobroja and Tatar communities from Crimea. So, which actually share today the same religion, the same rituals. So they actually cook in the same way. Not all the time, but most of the dishes are similar. So we have those in the south, however, but not everyone knows about these things. So sometimes I talk about plăcintă cu dovleac, and they say, we never had it. We only have plăcintă cu mere, apple pie, not pumpkin pie. So again, people, traditional recipes, family recipes, perhaps in their family, nobody cooked with pumpkin like that. So they decided that it was my invention, or, you know. So, and there is another very interesting thing we do in Romania. We cook with fermented ingredients. So we cook with fermented cabbage. Not only the fact that we have sarmale, which is like fermented cabbage leaves rolled and stuffed with pork, and whether we put rice or not, or bread or whatever. But we cook with shredded cabbage. Varza la Cluj is made with the shredded cabbage. Layers of shredded cabbage and meat, and sometimes rice or not. We have noodles with shredded cabbage. So we cook with fermented ingredients, which is a bit of a surprise for some people to find out that we're doing that, because they believe that by cooking we destroy a lot of the goodness in the fermented vegetable, which is partially, yeah, it is possibly, but not all the goodness. So, you know, and it's just a way that after we have all those barrels filled with whole cabbages fermented, you have some leftover cabbage there. So you shred it to make other dishes with it. We have soup with sauerkraut as well, and with potatoes sometimes in Transylvania. But we also have in the south, and that is another thing, we have a stew with gherkins, pickled gherkins, fermented gherkins, not pickled, because it's a difference. So mâncare de castraveți acri, sometimes it's made with pork, sometimes it's made with chicken. So we cook with fermented gherkins. And we also cook with pickled peppers that we stuff with whether rice or we put beans in them. So we have this habit of cooking with fermented things because we ferment a lot and we pickle a lot, because we have a very beautiful country and with a very nice climate. So we have loads of vegetables at some point at the end of autumn kind of thing, summer and the beginning of autumn. And we need to do something with those vegetables because otherwise they will just rot. When I grew up, now coming back to my mom's kitchen, we had to make a lot of pickles and a lot of dips and, you know, things to preserve all the vegetables like zakuska, to have what to eat during the winter, because in the winter we didn't have anything. We didn't have a shop like we have now in the UK, go to Tesco or whatever to buy something because we ran out of something. We didn't have anything. So we had to make jams, we had to make, to preserve our, you know, fermented cabbage, to cook with cabbage later on, gherkins, to cook with gherkins as well, not just served as a salad. So all these things were in the house, on the balcony or in the pantry if we had one. Sometimes the apartments were really small, you didn't have any storage. So the idea was that you kind of build a sort of shelves on the balcony and put all the jars in there, you know, on the balcony. So that was your pantry.
The reason you see me laughing is because this morning we were talking with Nicola, and she asked me what are the dishes that are kind of different, and I said, well, exactly the pickled gherkins stew is one of the weirdest one that I can name, simply because it's not something that my husband, who's British, has ever heard of. And I also mentioned pickled watermelon, the tiny ones that you pickle full. So yeah, and it's absolutely that.
We pickle quince, for instance, because quince is a tree that actually grows almost everywhere, but especially in the south, you will see it a lot in the south. It's full of quinces. So you don't just make jam or make marmalade with quince. We actually whether make compote, so you poach it and put it in a jar and put it in the pantry to eat it as a dessert. Or you can make a liqueur, gutuyată. You can make that, or distill it and make it into a brandy. But you also eat it with you make quince with rice. It's a dish for Lent, pilaf cu gutui. So so we eat fruit as well. We eat plums with rice as well, or prunes if you have them, air dried and that. So that's why we're saying that we do have in the autumn. If you want to, it's like a national sport, or it used to be. At least it was in my family, to pickle and preserve and make tomato juice to put in the soup for later, because we had tomatoes in the garden. So we made all this because you couldn't find much in the shops anyway. And then when were you able to find them? They were too expensive. So you made your own anyway. Yes, that's the story, Nicola. I think I confused you. I just I gave so much information. What should I say about any, like, briefly, other staple ingredients? Because we talked about dairy, we talked about meat, so especially pork in our part of the world, cornmeal, apples, and leeks. So funnily enough, because I live in Wales, that's the legume that is the vegetable that is the symbol of Wales, and also the symbol of Oltenia, where my grandfather is from. And I know, Sorina, you're from there, part of you is from there. My grandfather from my mother's side was from Oltenia. So obviously that's why, where I make the leek stew on the 18th of April in London at our supper club, because it would be a nice opportunity for me to talk about him as well. I don't want to make my books only dedicated to women. I know that the men didn't really cook, but they were there. So, and part of the heritage as well, because my grandfather had all that memories about how they used to eat when he was young, and still living in Oltenia. The bread that they used to make under that cloche called cest, which is, to be honest, is the way the Romans used to bake in Pompeii. They had the same testum. It's called testum. So we have a beautiful Roman heritage in the south, to be honest. It was the most Romanized frontier of the Roman Empire, and long lived. They didn't all go when they retreated from the Roman Empire and split. Some Romans left and stayed there. So that is, I would say, that the beautiful heritage of Transylvania is more like on the German side, and the heritage of the south is the Roman Empire, first of all, above all, and then many other layers, of course. But the beauty of the way we bake bread in Oltenia is the way Romans used to bake it in Pompeii. It gives me goosebumps, to be honest, because you won't find it in other places today. It's just if you study baking and bread making in Roman Empire, then you will go to Pompeii and have a look at those ovens. But then come to Romania to see how we still bake it, because we bake it the same. So it's a wonderful thing to talk about cuisine and history. So that's the beauty of the South, if you like.
Thank you very much, Irina. I'm going to come in with sort of an extended mixed question, so feel free to only answer part of it if you want. What was and you've partly touched upon this, what made you want to write Carpathia and Tava? What was the research process like? Especially around all of the recipes. You do talk about it in the book briefly. Discovering the recipes from very different communities, very different areas, and what was the response like when people read your book and realized that Romanian cooking is not homogenous, that it's not a single thing, that it's got many layers and facets that come from different regions, different influences, different ethnic groups, there's so much information in the book itself, albeit distilled, about Romania's mix of people in cooking. What reaction did that bring up in your readers and in the feedback that you've received?
Well, it was a surprise. You know, people didn't expect us to be so diverse, I would say, as a nation. But also raised the question of what is yours, you know, in terms of if that's German, that's Turkish, that's, you know, what is yours. But that is ours. All that, I would say, the way we distilled all the influences and the way we bring to the table all the ethnicities, that is the Romanian cuisine. So in a way, Carpathia started with the idea of just giving people a bit about Romanian cuisine and also a bit about the history of Romania, which is at the end of the book. You have a lot of like information about our history in general. And I wanted to actually cook the dishes I knew from my family, but also, as I said, the dishes that, as a traveler, if you travel to Romania for the first time and had the book and read the book, you kind of know what to expect, what sarmale means, what tocano, what pilaf, you know, so you will be, it won't be all new to you. So when it's not that new to you, then you will like to go and travel. But if everything is a new thing for you, when you don't go to Romania, then you will just say, well, I'll go where something I feel more relaxed and more comfortable with. So I wanted people to feel comfortable after reading Carpathia to go and visit Romania. So in terms of research, it was in a way less research than Tava, because it actually fed from, Carpathia was basically written from my memory, from my mom's family and everything else, and from what you can also find in restaurants, which in like traditional restaurants, which very often are festive dishes like sarmale and stuff, you know, or like the famous papanash and so on. So Carpathia is kind of an introduction, very brief introduction to Romanian cuisine as a whole. So not necessarily, I didn't go into this is the history of each dish. I went into like more like the story of my family and how we cooked it and why we cooked it and how we were testing the runner beans to be fresh at the market, you know, by snapping them and all that stories that I learned from my mom, how to judge fresh ingredients and not be tricked at the market to buy something that was old. So I went through that. Well, Tava actually started, the idea started when I realized that I have a lot of baking dishes to put in Carpathia and I couldn't. So I said, well, I have another book that can be about baking, because it was obvious, and even to me, that, hold on a minute, we're actually baking quite a lot in this country. And it is true, whether savory or sweet, we bake a lot. And I think the answer to many questions for us is to bake something, you know, make a placinta, make an alivanca, alivenci for birthdays or something like, you know, instead of just a layered cake. So, and I also started to look into how diverse, and to tell people how diverse our culture is, you know, because it is a bit German and it's a bit Hungarian, it is a bit Turkish and a bit Tatar and Armenian and Jewish and all that, you know, it is a bit all that. That's Romania. So I couldn't put all the ethnicities in one book. There are around 20 or 20 groups that have ethnic status in Romania and also get a grant from the government every year to promote their language, to keep their traditions alive. So, which is something really beautiful. I'm not aware of any neighboring countries that put so much money into their ethnic groups like the way we put. But also, we are the country that has a lot of ethnic groups and large ethnic groups, not just a few people. So that's another something that is really important to say about Romania. So I started to look into, let's say, the main communities. When you go to Transylvania, you can't really just say Hungarians, because there are two branches, the Szekely and the Magyar. They came different times, they did different things. So you need to split them. So I had to split them, and I had to put the gingerbread recipe with the Szekely and put langos with the Magyars, you need to stereotype at the end of the day. You can't just put disclaimers all the time when you write to say, well, but this is also specific to this and this, because it's hard to write. And then you go to the German settlers, and you do have this, you have the Saxons in the southeast Transylvania now, and you have the Swabians in Banat, which is southwest. So you can't really just say the Germans, because they have different stories, again, different dishes, they influenced each other, they had different approach to life, So you need to talk about that. Armenians in Transylvania, but not only, were really important for commerce as Jewish. But Armenians also had land which Jewish didn't have, because they were not allowed for a while, for quite a lot of time, to have any land outside of cities. So they were more likely to have jobs or start jobs in the city rather than being a farmer. So we have all that tradition of urban cooking versus rural cooking. And you need to talk about those as well, because Transylvania is all these flavors, and you go and sit at the Transylvanian table and you'll understand that it is a bit of everything. So then you talk about the South, and then again, as I mentioned, it turns more Balkan cuisine, more Ottoman cuisine, rather than like we had in Transylvania. So I had to look into that as well. But, I can't put them all. So in my next book, I talk about more of the South rather than Transylvania. And every ethnicity has its own story. But when you go and talk to them, you say, do you actually feel like you're Hungarian? And they say, no, I'm a Romanian. I'm Hungarian, ethnic Hungarian, but I'm a Romanian. And I don't go to live to Budapest or in Hungary, because now everybody is free to go and live anywhere they want, but they don't. They are in Romania because they consider themselves Romanian. And they took influences from their Romanian neighbors as well, in terms of language and also cooking. Cooking is part of culture, exactly like language. So obviously everything was a bit of a fusion thing. In different regions. Communities didn't tend to be isolated, apart from the Saxons in Southeast, but not for long, just for a few centuries. And then obviously Tava took a longer time to research, because I had to talk to every community, basically go and talk to everybody, not to every single person, but to the representatives of those communities. For instance, with Swabians, I ended up to talk to the Romanian Swabians that are today in Germany, some of them, most of them, remembering life in Banat. So it is an interesting story then, because you don't know that the Swabians, the German settlers in Banat, were deported twice. And obviously they ended up in Germany at some point because they couldn't be deported anywhere else. So it's a story that I had to put it in a baking book. I talked to my publisher. I said, it is a bit noir, in terms of a baking book. It's not just about flour and sugar and decorations. It's a sad story about a community. What do I do? So luckily, I have a very good publisher, and they said, well, you need to put it in. If it's part of that story of your community, put it in. And I put it in. And it is a proof, and it proved to me once more that food is not just for celebration. It's not just like, let's be happy around the table and all that. Food and traditional food can keep your identity, alive if you are about to lose it. When you're deported twice, can you imagine? You don't know where you are, why you are, and who you are anymore. And food was important for you to recognize your own roots and your own family. So there are stories that, very briefly, I put like sad stories in my baking book. So for someone who actually reads the stories and don't necessarily bakes from the book, it just gives you, I would say, a better idea of what history in Romania was like and is like, because there are still challenges even today. So I will continue to write like this if if the publisher allows me to.
Well, yeah, I don't want to gloss over that sort of noirish aspect that you just mentioned, but I was wondering how, because in the introduction to Carpathia, you say that Romanians are fun-loving people who like to eat well and surrounded by family and friends. And I just wondered how important that sort of aspect of fun and the concept of sharing is to Romanian cuisine.
Well, we like to share. I mean, even if we only, there are only two people cooking, but the rest of the sharing is a whole family. And we had quite a large family, but not the largest. So we like to gather together and eat and celebrate, and also comment a lot on dishes, So like you said, Sorina, about cozonac with your mother's sisters. I mean, my mom had two sisters as well, and my mom was more worried that her older sister Mariana was going to judge her food than us. Then she was going, yeah. So she was like, oh my God, my sister is going to see this. I'm not going to, let's prepare it in a different way. She was terrified that her sister would criticize. So it was a thing like that. And they all had their own specialities. I mean, Mariana made some very beautiful small sarmale that was like a work of art, They were all very nice. So we like to get together. And also, when you are a guest at our table, you are the queen or the king of the evening, whatever, you will be served first, you will be given the best cuts, the best meat, the best. And not only once, twice. I mean, if you don't accept seconds, it is a bit like an offense, So I mean,
You clearly didn't
already
like
had
it.
six cabbage rolls on your plate and you ate them, and then you say, would you like some more? And you have to say yes, because there is just a problem there if you don't say yes. So there are little things like that.
You mentioned cabbage rolls and doing them in a different way. I remember a story from my childhood when my grandma was very, very good cook, and mom was very, very inhibited by the fact that her mother-in-law was a very good cook, and she tried and tried and tried, and one time she came up with this idea, trick of how to make her cabbage rolls, and made them and invited my nan over and served her one roll on her plate. And my nan was like, you usually serve at least 3 in the south.
Yeah.
In Banat, you serve 6.
Yes.
Just be said. So she looked at it and said, but why are you only giving me 1? Like, what did I do to you? And she said, well, just try it and see if you like it. So she cut it open and realized that actually what mom had done is she'd made 3 cabbage rolls this thin and hid them all inside a single cabbage roll. So when she cut it through, there were like little 3 baby cabbage rolls in there.
Wow.
So from then on, they were best friends.
Very good. It is a bit, sometimes I'm asked, do I think about mom when I cook a certain dish or something like that? And I have to say no. It's because she criticized a lot as well. And even if she didn't realize, like, no, you don't do it like this, you do it like that, and you do it like, and you put this first, and then you put that. So it was that kind of conversation that for possibly an outsider would have looked like a lot of criticism or a fight even. I didn't kind of, feel it quite like that. But now when I cook, I don't necessarily think of mom to say, how wonderful it was when we shared some time together, possibly in that, but I really worry that I don't want to ruin the recipe and, don't make a good dish. But yeah, don't really, I mean, I think that this is a way how we learn in Romania, from a sort of, from criticism, basically, I don't think in the UK people would put up with this kind of conversation like the way we do it in Romania. Very direct, very blunt instructions, like no, don't do it like this. So, but what I like to think often when I don't make it very often, but when I make it, when I make strudel, and you'll see that recipe in Tava, and I actually talk about it. I talk about my grandmother, because we used to make strudel with my grandmother. She was from Transylvania, and just because, you know, I was there, she was like, "Okay, can you help me pull this and hold that, and don't do it like this because you're going to make a hole in it," and all, you know. And Mum, when she had time, she did strudel, so I was helping her because I knew from my grandmother how to make it. So I think of them when I make strudel, but not necessarily how they would comment on my skills, but on the fact that I owe them so much, because I actually make it because I can, because I learned them. I've learned the skill from them. So in this way, I do think about my mom and my grandmother. And it proves that in Tava is less personal than Carpathia because I did a lot of research in Tava, and because I don't come from a mixed family in terms of ethnicities, I didn't think that in Tava my personal story would be strong enough to actually talk about all the ethnicities that I wanted to talk about in the book. So it's more of a research book. So you will learn about history, you learn about how we used to cook, because I discovered them in all books, what type of ingredients we lost, what type of ingredients we reintroduced after the fall of the communist regime, and so on. So it's more of a research book, but when you read the story for strudel, you realize that, you know, that was an important thing, because that is I think it's possibly the only personal thing I share in Tava. While in Carpathia, it's a lot of that personal story in it. So it's a different approach. There are two different books in a way, although they complement each other. So if you buy one of them, then you will like to have the other one, I hope. And then possibly the third one.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, on that personal note, I was just wondering if you wouldn't mind sharing with us a bit about your sort of migration story and how you feel being able to share, you know, your personal and Romania's kind of cultural histories and heritages with a UK audience.
Well, I'm very grateful for being given the opportunity. You know, it's not, I don't write about French or Italian cuisine that is really popular and you can write books very easily. It was a niche that, you know, wasn't explored at the time when I started to explore it. So it didn't make it easy, the fact that there was no other book like that. People were like, well, perhaps we're not ready, or the public doesn't want. So anyway, I'm very grateful to, well, my agent, first of all, because they found my first publishing deal, and my first publisher. There are two different publishers. Tava is with someone else. First of all, you know, in a way, I'm grateful to them because they actually believed in the story. And then I'm very grateful to people who read the book from other authors or critics or, you know, TV presenters or, you know, like Nigella, come on. I mean, I actually took a screenshot when Nigella followed me and she said, this is a wonderful book. And I still have it. And I think I'll frame it, put it on the wall, because I just couldn't believe my eyes. Yes. You know, I mean, she started with Carpathia and then I asked her to support me with Tava as well. And she was, you know, gladly. And this is for real. I mean, it's not someone else or anything. It's just she's doing such an amazing job supporting authors like me, you know, niche authors at the beginning of their career when it's very hard. Nobody knows anything about you. She's amazing. So I was very grateful, not only to Nigella, but everyone else, you know, by going public and just saying, I really like the book. I mean, this is food that I would cook for my family, or I already cook for my family, you know, because there are stews, there are layers, you know, moussaka, there is food for families. You can see it, that is not necessarily trendy. I didn't modernize a lot of them. I kept them traditional. So these are dishes that you put them on the table, in the middle of the table, and everybody can eat and have a proper meal at the end of the day. So yes, I was, and I still am very grateful for that. And also, the biggest achievement in a way is like when people say to me, oh, I didn't know you cook like this in Romania, or I didn't know you have cities like this in Romania, because I put images, location images. I didn't realize you have, I don't know what they were expecting, but that is a very good thing for me when I change perception, or I actually made someone looking into where is Romania on the map. So that's important. Is Transylvania in Romania, and is it real? Then that's important as well, because it is, and it is, yes. So it's not just in a book. So all those things that I made people look closer, and that is important to me. No, not necessarily. Awards are important because, again, awards put you in front of more people, and more people will look and say, oh, I didn't know you have German settlers in Romania, and that's why you have this beautiful architecture in Transylvania. Or I didn't know you had Armenians. Someone told me that they thought that after the genocide in 1915, all the Armenians went to Europe. Well, the ones who managed to escape. But we were, in Romania, some of the first countries to actually accept Armenians. And a lot of the Armenian community today come from actually 1915. We do have older, but we have that community as well. And an Armenian in the UK said, my family went to France, and I thought that all Armenians went to France. I had no idea that you have Armenians in Romania. That is a winning point for me. If she realized that there is a community, a large community of Armenians in Romania, and what we did at that time, where it was important for us to accept refugees, we did it. We were, before the communist regime, and are today, a very tolerant country. That's why we have so many ethnic communities, because apart from the settlers, a lot of other communities just found refuge in Romania, a rather religious refuge, or just a new opportunity to have a better life than they used to have, I would say, in Russia or in Bulgaria or in Serbia when they were persecuted. Catholics, Bulgarian Catholics, went to Banat. We have Bulgarian Pauliceni, they are called, because they were not accepted in Bulgaria, which is a country that was Orthodox. So they crossed the Danube, and they came to Romania, and we said, yeah, okay, this is the land, you can settle here. So that's why in the end we have so much diversity in terms of ethnicities, because we were and are today a tolerant country. What happened during the communist regime, it's another story, because those were not normal circumstances. So it is what it is.
And they weren't necessarily reflective of the population, but rather of the regime. So yeah, you're right. Just before we started, we were talking about non-Romanian audiences. So I'm just wondering, is there a dish that gets more recalls than others from your experience? Is there something that people either ask more of or are intrigued by?
People go with something that is familiar, but not too familiar. So I have to say that at some point, the moussaka I put in Carpathia was very popular, because we make it with potatoes, and we don't make it with bechamel, we put sour cream, and we make it with pork, which is an interesting, alternative. And people at some point just bake that moussaka all the time. It ended up in the Washington Post, because they were like, oh, this is very interesting, let's write about it. So they put the recipe in there. So it was amazing for me to see it, our moussaka, my moussaka from home, famous. Then again, other people, right at the beginning, you need to remember that Carpathia was published in March 2020. So when everything was in lockdown already. So bang. So people, first of all, went towards the easy dishes. So a lot of coverage for fasole bătută, so for butter bean dip, because it looks like hummus, but it's not hummus because it's made with butter beans. And we serve it with delicious caramelized onions on top. And that's interesting, because you don't put any olive oil, you don't put any of that, pine nuts or whatever they put in the Middle East. We make it, with simple staple ingredient. You have onions in the pantry, you have butter beans, that's it. So fasole bătută, again, ended up on in many magazines and websites, and in Australia. Can you believe it? He ended up in a national Australian, well, it's called The Australian, basically, the newspaper. It has a supplement at the weekend with recipes. So it was Romanian fasolea bătută. This is it was surreal, I have to say, for me to see fasolea bătută all over the place. And it was, again, something that proves that the dish doesn't have to be super complicated or unique or never seen before. It just needs to be a bit of everything, familiar but not too familiar, as I said. So fasolea bătută was, and from Tava, I think the fascination with curd cheese and the way we cook with curd cheese just made people make papanaș, like in Transylvania, the boiled ones, the simmered ones, not the fried. And poalembru, the the Moldavian pies that are folded, because again, it's an interesting story with poalembru. The name comes from the apron that was tucked under, behind the belt. So the way you fold the corners of the pie is the same. So that's why our poalembru. So people started to bake that. So again, I'm very grateful. Tava got into a sort of competition, a baking club. And again, people from all over the world started to bake Romanian, and most of them picked poalembru to bake. And it was fantastic to see it in the States, people saying poalembru. I mean, on posting on Instagram, because that was the rule, you bake and then you post, they actually went into the trouble to actually write it with all the, Romanian letters, first of all. So to actually see the Romanian name, it just matters so much. And I never thought in my entire life that I would be so proud of a dish. To see it like this, it matters so much when you don't belong to a country and you kind of see your own writing and your own language in something that it's all over the world. It just it makes you very proud of who you are. And I think with Romanian cuisine, we need to be more proud of our cuisine and start talking about it. More of us, all of us. When you cook something Romanian, post it on social media, because it's good to claim it as well as Romanian dish. I can't do it all on my own.
Hi, Elena. Great.
Yeah. Any other questions?
Yes, I think Andrew's next.
Yeah, just a few. We'll try to think actually. How many more we want to ask, because you've been very generous with your time. We've been going for close to an hour and a half actually, and I was hungry before we started talking about food. I'm going to be honest. So I'm going to ask a very strict question, and I'm going to ask you for one. I'm going to ask you to do something really uncomfortable, probably, and pick favorite ingredient, favorite recipe to cook, and favorite recipe to eat.
Well, okay, favorite ingredient. It's not easy, but you ask me for just one. I would say garlic. Yeah, I mean, I put mușdei on a lot of things, so it must be favorite ingredient. And favorite to cook. Well, I really like, for a very quick dish, I like the noodles with sauerkraut to make it really quickly, and caraway seeds, because I don't necessarily have to make the noodles from scratch. So I use pasta, sorry. But so this is favorite because it comes together like really quickly in a few minutes. And favorite to cook, just for the meaning of it, how meaningful it is for what I do, is like to make sarmale at Christmas. I know it takes time, but the time is important, because that matters. All the effort and the thinking you put into it, that makes the dish even more special, and it is for a special occasion. So yes, that's the answer.
I was wondering, how easy is it to buy Romanian ingredients?
Sorry, Nicola, just really briefly, Tanya put her hand up just
Oh,
after I'd
sorry.
asked my question. Do you mind?
Yeah, so
Thank
just
you.
following your example, really, I was gonna ask Irina, if you had the chance to like remove one Romanian dish, what would that be? Because that's as, you know, equally as uncomfortable as the other question, I guess.
To remove it from a book or to remove it from my repertoire?
I just to make it non-existent of whatsoever.
It's complicated because I like all the dishes and I understand why they are cooked. But I'll tell you something else. An editor removed Tokitura moldovenească, so the stew that we make in Moldavia, removed it from my list, and I just couldn't bring it back. And the reason was that it was too much meat. And because we mix different like meat with sausages in a beautiful, delicious stew with a delicious sauce, because it ends up so rich and nice. But we actually put a fried egg on top of it and we serve it with polenta. So my editor just couldn't understand that and couldn't visualize it. And unfortunately, she Googled. So on Google, you get a lot of like not very good images about with Romanian dishes. And that was removed on the basis that it was too much meat, actually. So perhaps that's kind of answering in a way your question, but I would eat tokitura whenever. It's very good.
Right. No, I
Yeah.
just thought for me, for instance, I could go with 50. I don't know. I thought it'd be something
How dare
you don't like.
How dare you?
You know that in Gorj, so it's south of the Carpathian Mountains, they serve piftie with sarmale.
Yes.
Because,
And with momoliga, caldo.
yes, or with bread, because the actual piftie melts a little and makes a bit of nice sauce around it. Or piftie just with momoliga, and they make a sauce. So a cold dish with a hot dish, very interesting combination. I love piftie, I'm sorry to tell you. And I also make a shorter version of piftie because I can't really get trotters in the UK. Yes.
We get them in Birmingham.
Well, I'm not in Birmingham, not where I live. So yeah, you can possibly get them, but it takes a long time. But I make it with ham and with normal jelly, but with a lot of garlic in it. So that's a shorter version instead of boiling a lot. But there is no comparison with the proper piftie that it's set with the proper, meat and everything. So that's why I said it's hard to say no to dishes, because I actually like them all, especially in the new context of my work, which I actually understand why we're cooking like that. So it's nothing that really puts me off, unfortunately. I eat everything. And in terms of ingredients, Andra, I think you were about to ask me if it's easy to get Romanian ingredients here.
Yeah, I was
Nicola,
asking
sorry.
if you were finding it easy to buy Romanian ingredients or specific kind of foodstuffs in Wales or sort of more widely in the UK.
Well, that's the thing. When I write books, I need to write the books with the ingredients that you can find in the UK. So a lot of the ingredients, all of the ingredients in my book are, for instance, curd cheese is replaced by ricotta. So I tested the recipe with ricotta as well. So cornmeal is the cornmeal you buy from Sainsbury's, not the cornmeal you would have at home or something. But there are international food shops where you can find Middle Eastern cuisine, but sometimes in a corner they have Eastern European ingredients. So you can go there and buy telemat, you can buy curd cheese. Also, Polish shops have Romanian ingredients as well, but also their curd cheese is like our curd cheese, so you can use theirs. So nothing is impossible to get, apart from trotters. But trotters, even for me, I can buy them online, but I don't always go to kind of get them from a butcher in London or something. So you can buy anything online, or you can buy. So there is because we are an European country, we do have European staple ingredients after all. So it's easy to get. And in London, I think there are loads of Romanian shops, so you can go there and buy loads of things and loads of ingredients. And I would love to see Romanian cheese, especially curd cheese, in cheesemongers in London, like the very good one, like Neil's Yard and the La Fromagerie, you know, too, because we have a very good cheese makers in Transylvania, but in Romania in general. And that curd cheese, the way if it's made properly, it's absolutely beautiful. It's better than ricotta.
So I put 2 links in the chat. There's the Yorkshire Cheese Farm, which is a Romanian cheese company that travels across the UK that you might want to try. And the second one is the one that we had the opportunity to test ourselves a few weeks back, Elena, in Warsaw, is Delici din Lapte, which again had fresh cash. And it was really good. So yeah, both there's a lot more options now than when I arrived first in the UK, and they're a lot more mainstream, a lot more accessible, not just for Romanians. I mean, the Yorkshire Cheese Farm by the name is a British name company, so it caters not just for Romanians, which is great.
Okay, thank you. I will have a look and order and also promote them, because a lot of people ask me, where do I get the curd cheese from? And I'm thinking, well, not really. You can't go to a cheesemonger in London to get it. You know, I would like to get it in London when like cheesemongers, because they get a lot of people ordering cheese, and they're all cheese connoisseurs in their public customers. And I like them to taste Romanian, not just Romanians tasting Romanian, you know, produce, but I like the English, or if possible in the States, the Americans, to taste Romanian dairy as well, because it's really good. Tanya, you asked me something and I just couldn't read your message. What was it? Did you say anything?
After the last question, I didn't say anything.
Oh, sorry. I
No,
thought
she just commented in the chat about her experience in the US, about meeting a Romanian lady that would freeze Romanian cheese for special occasions like it was gold.
You know what I freeze? I freeze lardo. I have slanina in my freezer from Romania. I mean, if you go to Rome as a Romanian and come back to the UK with that, you need to come back with some sausages and some lardo and some cheese. It's just not possible not to come back.
Just imagine that over the ocean. You know?
Well, depends. That if it was in chicken luggage, you know, it's very cold out over there. Yeah, so it's fine. It's like in the fridge. I mean, you have to come back with cheese from Romania and with sausages and stuff. They're so good.
Okay, so going back to your research, I'm wondering, what was the quirkiest recipe you've come across and why?
I have to say, it's a savory recipe, but I couldn't put it in, and I will not put it, and I can't put it in any books. It's a sort of a chulama made in banat, but it's thickened with the blood from the bird when you killed it. And it's an absolute delicacy. And we're not the only ones in the world who thicken the sauce with, because it's a natural thing to do, you know, to use the blood. British make blood pudding, you know, but there is a chulama that, you know, ideally I could put the whole story in a book, but nobody can make the recipe, so it will not be approved on that reason. But it's a wonderful way to use everything from something that you killed for food. So it's a good learning point.
Fantastic. It makes me think of a recipe that I've seen not too long ago about how the French make their boudin, which is a blood sausage as well with blood. And I'm just wondering if that could be an idea for you to actually get together with other cooks from other nations in Europe and put together all the blood-related recipes.
To actually make a sort of pudding, like black pudding or boudin, it's like more like making a sausage. So, and there are regulations now that don't allow you to use fresh blood. So that's another story. You know, in the UK, the same, they all make it with powder. But to actually use the blood right away to thicken a sauce instead of actually putting in something that you cook, because you cook the boudin, you simmer it. You don't, like we make sangeretele
Yep. Yeah,
is
that's it.
while the sauce will just be mixed with the flour like a roux and make chulama. So that's even, you know, it needs to be instant because the blood needs to be used right away. So it isn't that, for that reason, it isn't, well, it is an interesting example of, again, respect for animals, for when you cook with them. Not throw anything, but it will not be, people can make it, so I can't put it in a book.
Mm.
Yeah.
I was wondering if you were going to tell me the translation of Tatshingite is a very interesting one in English. But
Yes.
maybe we can talk about that.
I actually use shut up and eat rather than, yeah, because it is the same, really.
Yeah. Rather than the literal translation, definitely.
But again, it's shut up and eat or swallow, because it's you need to eat it hot, because if it gets cold, it sets, the polenta sets, the egg sets, is not good. So you need to kind of stop the conversation and eat it. So that's the same.
Okay, who's next? And do we have any more questions, guys?
We only have a few left actually, and sorry, Tanya's just posted something. Did you want to come in with your question, Tanya, the one that you've just put in the chat?
Sure. I wasn't sure when to ask this. So I was having a look at your website, Irina, and I noticed that, you know, I was thinking this is like culinary ethnography, right? It has this element of, you know, social and history as well. So that term did not necessarily come up on your website, and I thought that that's a shame, because that's really really what it is, you know. So if I were to buy one of these books, I was wondering how exactly is the social / the family, but I guess more of the social element integrated in the books. How would you like tell the stories of those people, or is it out of observation? Is it their sort of testimonials? How is that social element integrated in there in the chapter?
Is their story told by me. So it's I don't reinterpret things. It's, if something happened, I put it in, as I said, you know, if there is something not that nice, it needs to be part of the story, because it was part of the story of that ethnic group or whatever I write about. I don't necessarily use food ethnography, for the reason that I am censored. I mean, I can't put any recipes in my books. So it's not just observing recipes and saying this is how they make it, like the example of the chulama with blood. Ethnographer would put that in and explain the social context, while my publisher doesn't allow me to put that in for obvious reasons. So I can only put what people can cook. And also I alter most of the ingredients, giving them alternatives to whatever you can find, which I think, from my point of view, that is already an attempt to not to have the authentic recipe. It is in a way genuine, but not the way we make it, because obviously you don't use the right ingredient. So from that point of view, that's why I don't say ethnography, because when you do ethnography, you just observe and you report. I observe, but then I need to change. I need to test the recipes. I need to, basically, I alter them. Even if you get traditional recipes, because you actually get similar result, I don't replace with a completely different ingredient. I just replace with something that is similar, and so on. So you will get traditional and not modernized. You know, some people say they cook, I don't know, Italian, but modernized. So they bring their own influences. So let's say I will just put almonds on a cake. Almonds were not part of the Romanian ingredients. You know, they were imported and used from time to time, we have walnuts. Walnuts grow everywhere in Romania. So let's say I would bring almonds into, and I will say, this is not traditional, but I like to use almonds. But an ethnographer would just say, people just use walnuts, or people just mix blood in the sauce, and that's it. There is no interest in making that recipe feasible and doable.
Right.
I do. Yeah.
That just brings me to the part of the Zoom when you guys said that it's just like marketing Romanian food better, which now I see the point why it's not. It's more about, you know, the promotion of these dishes and history more than yeah.
Yes, I mean, there is, the moment you interfere with the recipe, it's not the recipe, if it is to be really super, super clear. But in the end, you will eat sarmale, you will eat cozonac, you will eat the ingredient, you will have what we eat traditionally, but with ingredients that are accessible to you. So for that reason, I can't make that sauce that I was talking about, or for instance, I can't even necessarily make sausages because not everyone has the facilities to air dry and smoke and do it the traditional way. If it is for me to do a charcuterie book, the way we make charcuterie in Romania, then I don't think it will be a book that you can cook at home. It will be just a book that you can open it and just see what's going on and then put it back on the shelf. So that is something different. I don't have a publisher for that yet. Yeah.
So funnily enough, you have helped me introduce one of our last questions, and thank you so much for your time. We've talked about the work you've already done, and I was going to ask you about what's coming up next. I noticed that your books haven't actually been translated into Romanian, so I was wondering whether there are any translations in the works, or whether you have any other books lined up, either a sequel to Tava or something completely different.
Okay, so my books translated into Romanian, not yet, and I don't think there is a point really, because we do know these dishes in Romania. There is nothing, because I don't modernize them, there is nothing new for people to actually try. And we have Radu Anton Roman. I think this is the only book we need in Romania. So they can't translate. They could possibly translate Tava, because it's kind of a collection from different ethnicities and not everybody is aware of everything. But I think that perhaps the interest of our readers in Romania are not right here in the cooking. And also my books are available at Cărturești in English, so anybody can actually buy them. But in a way, my idea is to promote people who don't know anything about Romania. So I'm glad to see that Carpathia was translated into German, into Dutch, and even in Hungarian. Can you imagine? I was shocked and amazed and happy, of course, but I was like, really? And Tava again into German as well, because it's also a German story, by the way. So it was wonderful to see that these books get to people who don't necessarily speak English, which, you know, is very good. And in terms of plans, then I do have a third book, which will be published in October this year, and follows the story of the South. So I follow the Danube basically from when it enters the Banat to where it ends in the Danube Delta. So it's a west to east story, and it goes through Oltenia, goes through the South in a way. I go up and down. It's not like really next to the Danube, but it's the story of the lands of the river, not the story of the river itself. So it's not a fish book. It's a story of all the people, and again, it's more of the structure of Carpathia with starters, mains, and Ciorba. I have a whole again chapter of Ciorba and desserts and all that. And through every chapter, you get to meet another community in a way. So we talk about the Czech from the Banat, Serbians in the Banat in Svinica, and Adakale, that was, you know,
Wow,
what happened. And I got to talk to someone who lived there, and they shared some photographs. I put them in the book. So it was a wonderful journey, and Again, I talk about Oltenia because my grandfather was from there. So it's a story of southern Romania that I hope will surprise a lot of people, because now that Transylvania is so trendy and everybody knows about Transylvania, and whenever I put Transylvania on the menu or on the book or on my culinary tours, if I say Transylvania, everybody books and has a spot there. Then they don't know anything about the South, and it's as beautiful and as important and as diverse. And we need to know about Oltenia. That necessarily, I want people to say Oltenia because that would mean a lot to me. And hopefully, if I get to write other books, that I will go to Moldavia and I'll explore other regions that are, as I said, as beautiful and as important to us as Transylvania. Romania is not just Transylvania, it's so much more than that. So we need to start promoting those things.
Wow, that sounds fantastic. And just sort of tagging on to that, I was wondering if you could tell us a bit more about any upcoming events that you have in the UK. I know you mentioned there was going to be one in North London in a couple of weeks' time.
I have one on the 18th of April. Flavors of Carpathia is called the menu, because I take people from, it's a journey around Romania in a few dishes. And we will also have Pascha for dessert, because I want to talk about Romanian Easter, and Romanian Easter is in May this year. So obviously, with this event being in April, I have the opportunity to talk about the Easter in Romania, which is a wonderful celebration, and I think is more beautiful than Christmas. And then I have my culinary tours. I take people to Transylvania to eat and drink, basically. We don't do anything else. I mean, we can visit a church and that, yes, fine, but we kind of go and eat in some beautiful locations, and we eat at people's homes. So I give you the taste of Romanian cuisine at home, not Romanian cuisine in a restaurant, which is important because we get these two things all of the time. When we travel to Romania, we eat in a restaurant, we don't necessarily eat Romanian cuisine 100%, because at home we cook many other different dishes that are not on a restaurant menu. So I want people to experience both. So we will stay in Saxon villages, we will eat what people cook at home. So I think that's a wonderful way to explore Transylvania. And I'll keep doing these tours, and I will have some book events with the new book, but later on in October and November. But I'll post them on my social media. So if you are interested in any of this, keep an eye on my Instagram. I'm very active on Instagram, less active on Twitter, on Facebook, but I also post there. Or just send me an email and say, is there another event or anything else? Just ask me, I don't mind. So these are my plans for now, which doesn't
sounds pretty busy.
A lot. Yeah. Yeah.
Just that. Okay. Last question, I promise. We ask this of every single author that we've had the pleasure of meeting. What book would you recommend for our club at Carta de Viner? So just a reminder, it has to be either written by a Romanian author or by an author from anywhere else, but with an interest in Romania.
Oh, well, I'll recommend them to buy my books. I'm sorry. And after that, my interest is I'm obsessed with food. So it is what it is. I don't think I can follow the rule, but if you look in who writes in Romania about Romanian cuisine, that is important to any Romanian anywhere in the world, I would look at GastroArt and Cosmin Dragomir and what he publishes. A lot on websites, so free to access, but also the books he publishes. They are available everywhere. You can buy them from the UK and you can get them, or in the States. So very important what he does is very important work. So I would recommend him.
Fantastic. Maybe we can actually talk with the guys from Kurt's Romanești in UK and see if we can get them in the shop as well. So saying hi to them as well. So thank you very much for all your time, all your questions. It has been an absolutely whirlwind into history and gastronomy, and I'm so hungry right now.
Yeah, me too.
But fantastic
you.
time. Just a small reminder, the next event for Carta de Vine is a meeting into the land of Transylvania with Bronnie and Riley in May, on the 10th of May. So as it happens, it's a nice follow-up from today's discussion. So yeah, we'll wait for you then. Until then, have a lovely weekend, and thank you very much for sticking with us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I
Thank you.